Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing? Okay, I was just making a little small talk and Jenny pushed record. Hi, everyone. I'm Alencia Bowen, the Dean of the Ross College of Business and the Executive Director for the Franklin University Leadership Center. As many of you know, the Leadership Center seeks to inspire the creation and sharing of knowledge and innovative leadership practices through advanced teaching and transformative learning experiences in our dynamic, rapidly changing global community. I must share with you all that when I heard today's speaker present during the 2020 Annual Chamber of Commerce meeting, I was not only mesmerized, but I was also inspired. I knew then that we would benefit here at the Leadership Center from his expertise and authenticity. I am so excited today that Brett Kaufman, who is a builder of conscious communities, is here to speak with us. Brett believes that success comes easiest when working from one's highest and best self. This has motivated his work to be centered around mental health, well-being, and creative expression. Brett's vision of creating spaces that provide healthy, sustainable, and holistically supportive environments for people to work and live led to the founding of Kaufman Development in 2011 and has changed the real estate development landscape in one of the country's fastest growing cities. This passion has also motivated Brett to become a coach and mentor to over 100 entrepreneurs using a framework that taps into a person's life journey and provides tools for meditation, therapy, and personal development. So, Franklin University and partners, please welcome today Brett Kaufman. Brett, it's in your hands.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Lencia and Jenny and everybody at Franklin University, all of you for joining me today to share with you a little bit about my journey. The speech that Alencia was referring to at the Chamber of Commerce, I will share some of that with you today and kind of expand upon our business and our work. But to me, it's really all one, and you'll hear that kind of throughout the presentation, but my life and work are very integrated, and I've really used my entire life as a kind of North Star to build off of. Every experience that I've had, good, bad, or otherwise, has been one that has shaped me perfectly to build myself, my family, my friends, co-founders, and certainly in my business. So I will go ahead and try to share screen here and walk you through this presentation. Hang on one second. All right. And let me just do this full screen here. Okay, good. Everybody can see that. If not, let me know.
Yes, it looks great, Brett. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, Kaufman Development is the name of our company, and it was founded a decade ago, but I like to take you back to the very beginning. This is me as a baby, my grandfather, and with my father. My father's the one combing my hair there, and if you'll notice, I'm in a jacket and tie. I'm probably somewhere around 6, 7 years old in that picture, and it was not uncommon for me to be in a jacket and tie, which is why I often like to start here. It might sound kind of silly, but I grew up in a household where my grandfather came from nothing. He had no money, couldn't afford to go to college. He decided to start a business in sales with his brother. And they were just selling aluminum siding kind of door to door. I'm not sure exactly how they landed on aluminum siding, but they ended up successfully building a business. that had them, really feeling quite proud of what they had done, and really trying to then influence the next generation, and then the generation after that, which was me. And so I grew up kind of in a household that was very focused on what it meant to be successful, to be a man, to kind of follow in the footsteps that had come before me, and to conform to society, and really, go through the motions of life as my father and his father had done, which wasn't exactly how I wanted to do things. And yet, I did, attempt to conform into that for quite some time. My parents were divorced because, frankly, the kind of intentions that my grandfather had of giving his son everything that he never had backfired. My father was really entitled and spoiled, and he became addicted to money and to success and to alcohol and to other addictions that ultimately ended up ruining his marriage, and to some degree his life for some period of time, which led me to a pretty rebellious period in high school. And I like to share this with college classes in this kind of atmosphere, because I think what's important to know here is I was not a good student. I was somebody who was quite lost and was not focused. I had kind of learned to disassociate, and really academically struggled through high school, and really even into college. But what I did find was the rest of life, started to emerge for me. Things like art and music and friendship, and an open mind to different kinds of people really started to come in very much so for me in high school. I graduated from college, and the woman next to me there is my wife. That's family and friends. And I did what I thought I should do. That programming from childhood kicked in. I decided I would get married and I would go get a job, which is exactly what I did for the first 5 years of my career. I got married. I started having a family, and I went and worked at a bank. That's kind of the programming at its highest degree, was put on that suit and tie and go get a job, and work hard and impress your boss and move up, and make a life for yourself, be successful. Except I was miserable. I hated banking. And from what I could tell, most of the people around me were quite miserable too, living for weekends, for vacations, and retirement. It was very much a kind of, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And if you were there past 5 p.m., it was because your boss was there and you couldn't leave. And this was my exposure to the workplace out of college. And I frankly didn't know that there was anything else that existed. I just started to assume this was work, and that I would work for my career and do this. But I luckily, or maybe it was, some part of a greater plan, which is really my belief system, I started to bank some real estate developers, and I started to understand what it meant to kick the dirt and to create something in that way. And it was quite appealing to me. So I went and worked for a real estate development company here, and I got in on their operations side, the property management side. I started to learn the business, go through the development aspect, learning real estate development. I was getting a great opportunity to learn, and I loved the idea of creating things, kind of going back to that high school rebellious stage. I felt like it was very much an artistic effort, much like I felt like when I had discovered the art room in my high school, being creative in a business sense started to become something that I realized was possible. And so on the side, I started to buy real estate. Um, I kind of begged, borrowed, and did whatever I could do to possibly figure out how to buy my first duplex, which is what I did. I often tell college students or others that are interested in real estate, there's a number of ways to break into the real estate business. One of which is just to start doing it, which was the path that I had taken. I was learning it on the kind of day-to-day side, and then after hours I started to just do it myself. And my thesis really was that I thought you could create something that was unique, that had elements of a high-end product type, but that we could do that and make it affordable, relatively speaking, in an urban setting. And so I started to buy duplexes in German Village, and I started to do what at the time, this is another one that I bought in Victorian Village, but what I started to do was to put in these, at the time, and this is, 20 years ago now, were unique. High-end cabinetry, wood floors, glass backsplashes, um, designer countertops, lighting, stainless steel appliances, et cetera. These things at that point 20 years ago really only existed if you were in a $500,000 to $1 million home. You could not get something like this for rent for sure, and or under $200,000, which is kind of the market that we were starting to carve out our niche. And so these are some of those images. They look quite dated today, but trust me, at the time, that was kind of a unique thing. And I had now been with this production housing company, doing these projects on the side, having some success, starting to feel like maybe there was something that I could do for myself. The housing company that I was working for had been doing things a certain way for generations. They were very much a multi-generational production builder who would kind of do the same thing from site to site, from neighborhood to neighborhood. And that was starting to feel a little too restrictive for me. I wanted to actually do something in the way that I envisioned. I had a vision for how maybe I could create things my own way. And these three things kind of came into my life at the same time. Built to Lead, which was a coaching system, Summit Series, which was a bunch of entrepreneurs that were out there creating things on their own, and then something called Landmark Forum, which was a weekend where I discovered that, in fact, I could create my life to be anything that I wanted it to be. Sounds cliche, but it's true. And that's what I started to do. I wrote this note as I left Landmark Forum on a piece of paper that said, I create the possibility. The possibility I've created for myself is to be fun, compassionate, present, courageous, confident, and the author of my own life. And that is what I set out to do, was to author my own life by creating Kaufman Development with this statement. This statement existed before there was one employee, before there was one project, but I wrote this statement, which still very much guides us today. The Kaufman Development is created on the belief that communities of high design, built around well-being, creative expression, and impact, can change the world. Our communities and the people that work and live in them will stand out in every way, beautiful from the inside out, filled with passion and inspiration everywhere you turn. And that led us to our first project, the Gramercy, which was built out in New Albany. And the thesis, again, was borrowing from that early duplex experience where I thought we could create something that not only had a design that didn't exist in the apartment world at that time, but it also had an experience that didn't exist, an experience that would allow for us to bring all the things that we were passionate about in life into our work, and that the company of Kaufman Development could be those things that I wrote on this piece of paper, that it could be fun and it could be including things like compassion and passion and hobbies that didn't have to wait for weekends and vacations and retirement, that we could create a company and communities that allowed people to have easy access to the things they loved about life. So we started to build these communities. Gramercy included a very large community center, which at the time, again, was still a little bit new. It included all your kind of amenities, the swimming pool and the gym and all of that fun stuff. But we then would program it. We would program it with events that allowed people to connect to each other and connect to those things that they were passionate about. Programs, opportunities for them to engage in the community, to volunteer in the broader community. All of this kind of holistic way of living started to emerge with this first project. And we then went downtown and applied the same logic to the urban environment. So this is 600 Goodale, right across the street from the White Castle headquarters. My belief here was, let's create something that felt like a hospitality way to live, something that had aspects of hotels and museums and art and design and architecture that, really left people feeling uplifted and energized, but also then was programmed with those events, that you could live in a community downtown where you could actually be a part of a community in a unique way. It wasn't just a place to sleep. We then went out to the suburbs and built an urban product in the suburbs. So this started to really kind of catch the idea of walkability, of sustainability. How do we create a urban environment in a suburban neighborhood so that people don't have to live downtown, so that they can live closer to where they work? This particular project was directly next to the JP Morgan Chase facility. And so a lot of those people were stuffed in little onesie twosie apartments downtown, or the newer apartment complexes downtown. They were commuting 30 minutes to get to work. Now they could literally walk to work and have the same kind of environment with a, fully amenitized high-end market rate apartment project that gave them all of that, event programming and lifestyle that we were providing. We then tested the theory, not just where you live, but where you work, by building 250 High. This was a unique project adjacent to the old city center mall, sites that had sat vacant since the mall had been demolished. And it had some development challenges in that the parking garage was adjacent to the site. You had to get up above the garage so that residential could work on all four sides. So we built office on the first 6 floors and then put apartments on the 6 floors above that. And here we really tried to pioneer the idea that you could have amenities, gyms, rooftop terraces, community rooms that would allow for people to live and work in the same project, and that they could share those amenities, and that we could provide them all of the experiences that we were providing in a residential community to a office community, and also, a shared mixed use community. So people here, again, they could show up for work in the morning, change at lunchtime, go with the group to volunteer, or take a spinning class, a yoga class, whatever it might be, hop in the shower, go back to work. And, if they wanted to just go right upstairs to where they lived, they'd have no commute, less parking expense, et cetera, et cetera. So that was 250 High. It worked really well. So we jumped across the park and did 80 on the Commons, which was a similar mix directly on the park at Columbus Commons. And then this is a project that we jumped out of town with. This was really kind of a fun project that allowed us to really test the experiential aspect of what we do, at the kind of ultimate experience, Lambeau Field. We built this project for the Green Bay Packers, apartments and for sale townhomes adjacent to the football stadium. They built what was called Titletown, which included all kinds of bars and restaurants and office buildings and a whole bunch of kind of a sledding hill, a football field, all kinds of interactive opportunities for our residents and for the people of Green Bay. So that was a fun project we finally got out of town for. And this is a little bit about what that looks like. You know, we mentioned the idea of wellness. So obviously there's a huge fitness component to it. Um, and we partnered with a lot of different people in the community. We still do. We try to collaborate with a lot of employers, a lot of professionals, certainly people on the well-being, both physical and mental side of things. We have a lot of partners. This is a particular picture of a day we started called Inspire the World Day, where it was a full day of kind of holistic activities at every one of our projects across the city. Lots of philanthropic opportunities, including something I'm quite proud of called BESA, which we co-founded. We invested the original investment dollars into BESA, which is a nonprofit portal which allows all of our residents and people that work and live in our communities and our company to volunteer in the community with a push of the button. So they give you dozens of opportunities. All you have to do is press the button, show up, and everything's taken care of for you. No red tape, no kind of logistical challenges. They make it super easy, and you're able to make an impact with people that you live with or work with in a very fun and impactful way. And I'm really happy to say that BESA has grown substantially since we started it. They now are providing services to all of the limited brand companies, Victoria's Secret, Express, Pelotonia, Jenny's Ice Cream, Columbia Gas, you name it. They're now supplying this same service across the city very broadly. And, I think what's important here, I mentioned, kind of how I bring my life into my work. One of the reasons this was started was because I was having a hard time finding ways to easily volunteer in the community with my own family. I would want my kids to spend some time volunteering, and it was tough to get somebody to call you back, to fill out the paperwork, to organize it. And so when, BESA became an idea out of that, we figured we were solving problems for us personally, and also we weren't alone. Other people must be sharing that same issue. And this is actually a little dated, but it's amounted to a lot of volunteer hours and dollars raised and donated, which we're quite proud of. This brings us to Gravity. Gravity is our latest expression of our work. You might be familiar with it. It's full of all kinds of murals and light sculptures and green walls, and it is a mixed-use community in the Creative Arts District of Franklinton. This is a neighborhood that we're quite proud to be developing in. It has a really strong, long before us, ethos of creative energy. The Idea Foundry and a lot of the artists that were in the Short North have kind of shifted over into this neighborhood. And so we wanted to build a project that was very complementary of that energy, which is what Gravity is. It's a 234 unit, sorry, hang on one second. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. My dog has a mind of its own. If you're a dog person, I'm sure you can appreciate that. Moving on, so Gravity is 234 unit apartment community, a 50,000 square foot office building, a first floor of retail, and is open now and stabilized and been very successful. So much so that we are going to jump across the street and do a second phase. And I'm going to actually switch screens here and play a little video for you that will describe both phases. So hang on one second while I do that. Whoops, hang on one second, I'm trying to get the sound on here. Yeah, here we go. Okay. There we go.
Gravity is a community that brings like-minded people, programs, and physical spaces together to create a more fulfilling, conscious environment. We believe that this intentional living nurtures a balanced mind, body, and spirit. Located just moments from downtown Columbus in the growing creative community of Franklinton, Gravity offers more than just an exceptional residential and working experience. Gravity features on-site mental health services, a transcendental meditation center, local art, restaurants, microbrew, non-profit coffee shop, and multi-use communal and office spaces for forward-thinking brands, like the cancer-fighting organization Pelotonia. Built on the pillars of well-being, impact, and expression, this property has been designed with community in mind. Gravity events, podcasts, and on-site programming brings thinkers and doers into a space that feeds curiosities and encourages engagement. Meet new people, strengthen bonds, and upgrade the human experience. Having successfully proven the connection between individual and neighborhood, we are now ready to expand our community with Gravity Phase 2. Phase 2 will feature 840,000 square feet of space, including a 12-story residential tower, a co-living community, a large-scale creative office building, and art-filled experience zones throughout. The 6-story office building offers 170,000 square feet of creative office space. The mid-rise residential building features 68 apartments, 33 co-living suites, and 20,000 square feet of indoor-outdoor amenity space. A 900-stall parking garage will provide easy access for the 24 townhomes and 3,600 square foot retail building on the south side of the community. While the next step in our journey calls for expansion and oneness, our mission to nurture balanced minds, bodies, and spirits remains the same. Welcome to Gravity.
Okay, so that is Gravity, which then brings us to kind of our latest expression of our work, which is Greenhouse. Greenhouse is solely focused on more of the wellness side of things. So here we say it's about well-being, nature, and transformation. And so what we're building is a kind of a urban Zen spa-like experience that you might go to a resort in Tulum or Bali or somewhere else in an exotic part of the world. But we're going to try to recreate that experience in an urban environment. That's this project here in the short north, and then give people the amenities that would allow them to engage in something that you would have to typically maybe travel to, or you would find in a high-end condominium project. Again, going back to that original thesis, which is how do we create something that's of high design, that's very impactful, very experiential, and do that at a market rate kind of affordable price, which these apartments are. And when I say affordable, it's not affordable housing. It's just going to be more affordable than a luxury condo or a single family house or something that you would typically have to be in to have this kind of experience. And then again, there's the idea of kind of bringing myself forward in the work. This is kind of the stuff that I'm passionate about. How do we engage in work that enhances our lives physically and mentally? And here's some of our partners in what we've been creating to this point: Pelotonia, Roosevelt Coffee. A lot of art is incorporated into every project we do, so the artists are very engaged. We're trying to create something that is holistic in that it will bring kind of nonprofit. It'll bring people that kind of share the energy of doing well and doing good at the same time. And it's allowed us, actually, let me fix this screen here. Yeah, it's allowed us to start to branch out into the experiential aspect of the business to be something that includes more than just real estate. So for me, as I've kind of evolved as a human being, I've evolved as an entrepreneur. We started a podcast. We're in year 2 of the podcast. I think we've released over 60 episodes. And the idea of the podcast is, how do we create a opportunity for people to learn from each other's life experiences, to learn from their full journey? And so that's what people do. They come on and they talk about their full journeys so that our listeners can see themselves in the journey and take some comfort in doing that. And that has led us into venture capital. So we're now launched a venture fund where we're now investing in other entrepreneurs that are looking to do the same thing that Kaufman Development has done: provide experiences to people, build organizations and products that are aimed at making the human experience a better experience. And with that, I will stop my share and see if you guys have some questions for me. And I don't know if I should be, if you want to throw them in the chat, we could go that, or if somebody wants to just hop in, we can do that too.
First of all, Brett, I would just like to say, great. Thank you for sharing your inspirational journey with your company. I think it's exciting to see how you can live your true, authentic self, and it comes through in what you do in your secular world. So I appreciate that very much. Let's see if there are any questions. Anyone have any questions or comments for Brett? If you're having a difficulty throwing your comments in the chat, feel free to unmute yourself and speak in the mic. Okay. So I know that when you were sharing about the different structures you're doing, um, inner city to bring sort of that resort feeling, that feeling of tranquility, can you share with us how having a balanced mindset impacts one's ability to um, thrive, especially during a disruptive time such as COVID?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that COVID has really forced the world to rethink everything to some degree. And we certainly had to rethink how we were going to provide experiences to our residents when so much of what we were doing was relying on in-person events. But, one thing I've always told our team is that, we don't do what we do because it's some sort of niche brand trendy thing to do. We're
Mhm,
doing it because it's who we are, and we've built an entire company of people that have bought into that and share that passion, which includes being innovative. We want to do
mhm,
things differently, and so for us to innovate at a time like COVID was candidly not that hard. We figured out ways to do things that we were doing in COVID times. We would have trainers come and yell up to people on their balconies and lead workouts on a
mm,
balcony workout, or we brought the symphony to come play to people, in a socially distanced way. We've done a lot of online virtual events. We just pivoted and have still, maybe even more so in some ways, because people were together in their building, not traveling, not going to work, built community in maybe a way that was even stronger. And so, yeah, I think it's just kind of important to one, show up fully, no matter what the circumstances are, and be committed to something greater than yourself. And for us, that was the communities that we are building and the people that live in them. And we wanted to make sure that this time was as good as it possibly could be for them.
thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And also, picked out a couple things that you said, and also inspired building community act. It's not just something that happens by happenstance, but you have to be intentional as well. Thank
That's
you. I think my camera wanted to do some fun things.
right.
Dr. Charlie Sanders asked the question. He first said, very impressive. He asked, how is your organization approaching housing inequity?
Mm. Yeah, so I've been pretty vocal that we are not a affordable housing developer. That is not what we do. It's a skill set that we don't have. So what we have done is partnered with others who do, to make sure that we're doing what we can to tackle the inequities of housing. So, for example, we've partnered with a group called Homeport, who is an
Mhm,
affordable housing developer. And then we provide design services, development services. In the case of Gravity, we provide parking and things that would otherwise be very difficult for an affordable housing developer to put into their model. And so Homeport will have an affordable housing community adjacent to Gravity that allows for that kind of shared experience. That's one way. We do also have workforce housing that's in quite a bit of our projects. There's a percentage that exists in pretty much every project. And then a new kind of third innovative approach that we're taking, which is co-living, where you can get the kind of fully amenitized high-end experience of an apartment community, but you rent by the bed instead of by the
mm,
unit, which makes it a lot more affordable. Frankly, it's actually less expensive on a per monthly rent standpoint than some affordable housing.
mhm.
And it doesn't require any subsidies. And it's integrated into a community where people have their own apartments as well. So it's very kind of seamless. And so those are the three ways that we're really trying to do our part in tackling, the inequities and affordable housing elements.
Great, thank you. Cecily Jackson, one of our doctoral students, just wanted to say thank you for sharing how you merged your passion with your professional experience. I have a couple other questions here also, Brett.
Okay.
Dr. Ray Forbes says, it looks like your target market is young urban professionals. Is that the case? If so, do you have any plans for other age groups? So a lot of us are entering in different age categories. So good question, Dr. Forbes.
Yeah, so we don't target a specific demographic. There's definitely a lot of young professionals that naturally gravitate to what we do, and also to living in an urban environment. But we do have our fair share of empty nesters as well. And the two projects I showed you, 250 High and 80 on the Commons, those were actually very popular with both empty nesters and more senior professionals, people that were retiring and wanting to live downtown. We have the same thing at a project that I didn't show today, the Levesque Tower, where we purchased the top 20 floors and have a lot of empty nesters and an older demographic there. But mostly what we're after, and I think this is just kind of a little bit more of the trend in kind of housing, but where people are starting to, in Columbus at least, warm up to the idea of living downtown, living in an urban environment. But mostly what we try to do is provide an experience that has this kind of holistic aspect, the holding wellness and impact up highly, and whoever is attracted to that will be who lives in our communities. And that isn't necessarily an age thing. It's really more of a lifestyle.
Great, thank you for sharing that. We have another question by Dr. Charles Saunders, who's one of our board members. He's our very engaged board members. He said, also given your development in the Franklinton area, are you thinking of partnering with Mount Carmel College of Nursing to help develop a learning space environment there? And the West Campus has changed a lot with Mount Carmel with them moving to Grove City.
Sure. Yeah. No, we would love to. That Mount Carmel's been a bit in flux, and they actually have hired a developer to develop the adjacent ground to the hospital. And I believe they're partnering on some housing and other kind of space related to the nursing school. We've partnered with Ohio Health, actually. They're going to build a urgent care and some other community services built into our office building in the second phase of Gravity. So certainly want to make sure that the hospitals and healthcare workers have a good environment to do what they do, and we're happy to be doing that with Ohio Health.
Great, nice. Thank you for sharing that. It's some things are so necessary that you don't even think about. Sometimes there's just minor urgent care needs. What about other? I've seen the landscape kind of shift downtown, and what about more affordable, or just not just affordable, but access to good food, quality food, like grocery stores, micro grocery stores. Like you see when you're in Europe, you're walking down the street and there's a little grocery store that has certain little products that you can buy, and then another one. What about that?
Yeah, I think it's really kind of neighborhood driven, and the retail is really the last thing to come in Columbus, and maybe in most cities. You're seeing it in the short north. There's no shortage of retail there now, and it continues to kind of evolve and become higher end and more national. People from outside of Columbus, for better or worse, that retail environment is very strong, including the grocer aspect. There's been some markets that have popped up. You've got the North Market, you've got the Kroger on High Street, the
Right.
Giant Eagle and Neal Avenue. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff in a dense populated area. In Franklinton, it's been harder and slower to attract, the food users that you'd like to supply, both, in the market, grocery, and in the restaurant. We are seeing the breweries and coffee shops and restaurants start to pop up there. And
Mm-hmm.
so, over time, that'll continue to develop.
Right. I agree. Thank you. Just a few more questions, it looks like. Dr. Forbes asked again at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned living an integrated lifestyle. Do you see this as different than the work-life balance approach?
Yeah, I mean, I do. And, I'll let, you decide if you agree. But I think that my definition of balance is to not stay too far over in one area for too long. I'm not a big believer that you need to kind of have things like perfectly parceled out and balanced. I don't think that's
Mhm.
realistic. I think there's times where if you're starting a business or you're in school where you might need to be a little bit more there, and there's times where you might need to be a little bit more with your family, and then there's times where you can have a little more time for yourself.
Mhm.
And those aren't always going to be equal as long as you don't stay over in one place for too long. The integrated piece is really about kind of loving what you do for your work and trying to bring your passion to it. So I don't ever feel like come the weekend, I need to go volunteer somewhere because I've been doing that, throughout the week where I work. I don't really feel like I need some, creative outlet because I do that within my work. If I want to go for a run in the middle of the day, I'll go with my CFO and we'll have a conversation about work while we run and we'll connect personally too. So that's really more what I mean by integrated, that it's
Mhm.
not so much about kind of balance. It's more about not having your work and your life be as separate as a lot of people make them.
Mhm. And that's become a lot easier to do, wouldn't you say, Brett, because of the pandemic, especially working from home. It's easier to say I can go do something outside. I think when we were talking, I was sharing how I was kind of multitasking outside doing something while I was listening to an event. And it's just something that's natural and it also is enthusiastic and it brings inspiration to individuals. So I see
Hmm.
that this pandemic has probably helped that more integrated lifestyle. I
Yeah.
think we have one more question here. Jamila asked the question, has Kaufman Development ever developed or considered a community of single family homes? And
Hmm.
he also enjoyed this presentation very well.
Yeah, thank you. We have, and we have not moved forward with it as of yet. We've been contemplating it for some time and developed product, and do believe that this kind of approach to living would very much make sense in a suburban environment in a single family house product type. But we there's a lot of complexity to that business too. It's very risky, it's very capital intensive, it's very labor intensive. You have to make sure that homes are serviced differently as an owner. There's a lot of complexity to that business, which has kind of kept us from hopping in with both feet. But I do believe there's an opportunity there and something that we are considering.
Great. So Brett, really have enjoyed learning more about you, your work, and how you have combined, as someone has said, your passion with what you do daily. Um, when we hear the term conscious communities, I think that we all come away from this presentation today, this sharing today, with a different insight as to what we need to do as contributors of a conscious community. Are there any last words that you like to share with our community before you leave today?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and to share my story and our work. And, I think that, what I really will leave you with is this idea that, you don't have to kind of follow in the footsteps of your maybe your parents or society or any other kind of stories, rackets, ideas that you have that you are supposed to be doing something, that you should be doing something. Hopefully, what you hear today is that you can do anything. And I know that that often doesn't feel true, but I believe it to be true. And I believe that the secret to doing that is to bring yourself to your work and the things that you love and are passionate about to your work. And then you can have, everything that you want. That's been my experience. And it's one that has been very challenging and hard and difficult. And there's many failures that I did not share with you today, but they're there. I don't really share them because I don't really consider them to be failures. They're just part of life and learning, and and it's a joyous and fun experience. So I'll leave you with that, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate you sharing and look forward to future opportunities for you to continue to share with us about conscious communities in your life's work. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and continue to look at our franklin.edu website to see other opportunities coming up for the Leadership Center, the Sales Center, the Global Center for Healthcare Education, and the Center for Cyber Security. Thank you, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.